TDS got its biggest rebalancing update yet, changing over 39 towers. Today, I'm going to be trying to rank every single adjusted tower, ranking them based on how good their adjustment was, not based on how good they are now. I don't want to waste any of your time because this is going to be a long video, so let's start off with the F tier towers. So first off, we're going to be discussing the balance changes that I think were F tier because they were either completely useless or unnecessary, or because they were just straight up a horrible adjustment. First off, at F tier, we have Freezer. It was apparently rebalanced, but I can't even tell what was changed at all, and it even says question mark in the actual document that listed the changes. If I'm missing something here, let me know in the comments, but that goes in F tier because I don't really see any change. Next in F tier, we have Ace Pilot, another tower that feels like it barely changed. The stats were apparently adjusted, but I don't feel anything playing with this tower in the grand scheme of things. Only change that I actually noticed was the price drop for level 4, but even then, that feels like nothing as it's only a 700 cash difference. Next in F tier, we have Turret. Self-explanatory, gained 1 extra range at max level. What was even the point? Next in F tier, we have Toxic Gunner. It received a grand total of 1 change as well, which was a nerf. This nerf doesn't even do anything in the grand scheme of things, and it just felt like they did it because they thought it was funny. Next in F tier, we have Mini Gunner. This tower feels like it barely changed as well, and it clearly was only changed because of Golden Mini Gunner being reverted back to its old state. Now we have our last F tier, being Golden Scout. Oh my lord, this change makes me feel an indescribable amount of fury and rage. For years, Golden Scout and Golden Soldier were at constant rivalry, with people debating which one was better, almost all of the time. However, it was finally at a point where Golden Scout and Golden Soldier finally had both of their uses, with Golden Soldier being usable in the early game, however, best in the late game for extra spam DPS. Golden Scout was much better in the early game than Golden Soldier. However, because it had a placement limit, it couldn't be spammed like that. So you had to choose. Either have limited extra DPS in the late game with Golden Scout, however, a much cleaner and easier early game, or choose Golden Soldier, which was by far worse for the early game, but you could spam him later on, making him worth using over Golden Scout. However, this change completely removed that clean balance between the two of them, for some reason removing Golden Scout's placement limit? What? Nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted this. This was such a horrible change, and I can't even grasp why they would even think of going through with it. This is the only change that I truly believe was completely and utterly garbage and entirely unthought out. I just know this was the work of Tom the Ninja. I just know it. F tier change. This was garbage. Now we're in the D tier. These are mostly just changes that I thought were weird or not executed correctly at all. First in D tier, we have Warlock. I don't like this change because it was across the board all nerfs, and small ones at that. This to me feels like an adjustment they were kind of scared to make because they really didn't go to make too many changes. I feel like they should have nerfed him more significantly and then added an attribute which would make up for the nerfs. I think something like higher fire rate on the range attack with less damage overall would have been good, but I don't know. I don't know what the balancers were thinking with this one, so I could be shooting an airball here, but in my personal opinion, this feels like an underwhelming adjustment and they could have done much better. D tier. We also have Brawler at D tier as well. This was another underwhelming adjustment, and it overall just feels like a pointless change, and it feels boring to use now that they've made these changes. Then, next, we have Shotgunner at D tier. This nerf was more than a nerf. They absolutely wrecked this tower with these adjustments, and now it's literally just a useless tower. It's not meant for early game, not meant for mid game, so what the heck's it meant for? Late game? Nobody is using the 122 DPS tower with 11 range for late game. Nobody is using this tower now, ever. It's truly a one-of-a-kind useless tower that has absolutely no niche, it seems. Bad change, much to be improved upon, but it's not nearly as wrecking as something like Golden Scout. Next at D tier, we have Executioner with very few changes. What was the point? Like, genuinely, what was the point? This didn't do anything to the tower so significant that it's going to be brought into games now. The changes aren't so minor to the point where it deserves F tier, but it doesn't deserve anything above D. Next at D tier, we have Crook Boss. Congratulations, you removed his versatility. You've made this level tower go from good to mediocre at best. Could be used as an all-rounder with early game and mid-game capabilities that weren't as effective in the late game, to a pure late game tower that is so incredibly outclassed by something like turret or minigunner, it's pitiful. Next off at D tier as well, we have Golden Crook Boss. This change is absolutely one of the funniest to me, because what was the goal with this change? It's like they said, oh, let's gut this tower and make him the worst golden tower, even though barely anybody uses him already. They basically did the exact same thing that they did to regular Crook Boss, removing all of his versatility and making him a late game DPS that absolutely nobody is gonna use. Next at D tier, we have Militant. This change really didn't feel like it changed anything, and it feels like they just changed some stats for the love of the game. Lastly at D tier, we have Assassin. I really don't like these changes. Felt like it was done for no reason, and it was also advertised as the Shotgunner replacement, just to not even perform a tenth as good as Shotgunner used to. Finally, we're at C tier, and we're getting to some of the okay changes. First off, with C tier, I have to put Accelerator here. This rebalance was definitely going in the right direction, but it most definitely needs some work. The overcharge being basically impossible to reach now is a really boring change. I say that it should be harder to reach, but at the end of overcharge, he does some sort of extra explosion of damage to the enemy that he's targeting as a reward for making him do that much damage. I also like there being only 5 accelerators now, and in my opinion, 5 accelerators is much more fun to use over 8. I also don't like how he costs 7.5k to place. That's a very poor decision. Chop off some of his level 0 damage in cost, give it to level 1 to make him easier to place. Next off, at C tier, we have Commander. This was not a bad change by any means, and I understand they removed some of his fire rate boosts to make towers overall better without supports this update, but I still feel like it was an unnecessary change. They basically removed all of his range in exchange for having absolutely insane fire rate boosts. And I feel like that was a pretty okay spot for him to be at, but now he only has a 40% fire rate boost at max level with way more range. I think I preferred him having less range. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about this change in the comments. Next off at C tier, we have Gladiator. Hooray! They buffed the tower that has been out of meta for 2 years now, but it's still absolutely terrible. I'm not going to talk too much about these changes, as if you've tested them, you'd know that he's still not worth using. C tier change, because even if he's still not in the meta, he's still at the very least not awful. I also understand that he was pre-buffed in preparation for the Gladiator rework, so, but like, what's the point? I don't understand if you're just gonna change these stats in any way. Next off at C tier, we have Golden Soldier. This was such an okay change. Using him, even though he lost like 20 DPS, he still feels just as good to play with, mainly because he's just cheaper. This change felt unnecessary, but I'm not going to say it was awful. Finally, at C tier, we have Medic. What was the point? It really feels like they're just changing stats for the love of the game with this one, and the stat changes are just so random with this one, and it doesn't really make sense, and I don't even think it's worth going over. But just know that I think it's alright, at the very least. Next off, we're at B tier. Finally, getting to the good stuff. First off, we have Farm. I like Farm's change. It really feels like a nice shakeup of the meta. Now that he's overall way more expensive and provides slightly more cash, there's more incentive to not bring him thoughtlessly because he will be taking up a significant amount of your cash. I don't really have much more to say about this one. I like it. Next up at B tier, we have Hacker. I'm a fan of this rebalance, but it could use some extra thought for sure. I do like how some of her versatility as an early game was chopped off, overall not letting you bring an absolutely insane loadout and making you need at least one early game tower. What I don't like is how there's still absolutely no incentive to upgrade her to the top path, and in fact, even more incentive to upgrade her bottom path now. Out of the 2 paths you'd possibly choose, why would you choose the top path now that it does literally just less for more money? Next up at B tier, we have Engineer. Still don't have that ramp up rebalance we were promised, but this rebalance is still pretty good, and definitely makes her more fun to use, with all levels having a purpose now. B tier, mainly because it doesn't live up to the hype, but it's still a good change nonetheless. Next up, we have Soldier. This wasn't too crazy of a buff, but now Soldier is actually an option that beginners should consider using thanks to it, so I really appreciate that. Next up, we have Pyromancer. This tower is actually kind of usable now with these buffs, so I'm glad they made them. Nothing much else to say. Finally, we're at A tier. These are the ones that I actually like. First off, we have Electroshocker at A tier. This is mainly because I really like what they did with making him versatile as an early game and as a weaker support tower later on in his upgrades. These changes were made to compensate for adding Tesla, so instead of nerfing him to make him a worse Tesla, they actually gave him something new so that he's not an absolutely awful tower that should never be considered. Next up, we have Golden Minigunner. These changes were absolutely great, and it made it go back to being a spam tower that can be used in solo. His issue before was that he was too balanced around his placement limit, and that was bad because he takes up too many placements in stuff like squad or trio. However, he wasn't even worth bringing in solo either because you could alternatively just bring regular minigunner for even more DPS because it doesn't have a limit. The issue of him not working in squad still exists, but at least he's usable in solo now, so he's a decent golden tower again. Next, we have Necromancer. Nothing too much to say about this change, I just really like how they gave him a buff and made him even more fun to use. Next, we have Paintballer. Now, he's at least kind of okay rather than being completely useless. Even if he's not the greatest, these changes were still really good because he is now incredibly fun to play because of his incredibly spammy playstyle. This tower has been the worst tower for the longest time, so I'm glad that he's finally being shown some love with this rebalance. Next, we have Frost Blaster. A lot of people are going to disagree with this one, but I think that even though this was across the board a nerf due to removing his freezing capabilities, he's much more fun and unique to play with due to him having decent damage output alongside being pretty cheap. Next in A tier, we have Hunter. Now, this tower is really fun to play with a significantly boosted DPS output. Overall, a really great change moving him from starter to intermediate, and a great change making him a mid through late game DPS. Then we have Cowboy. This was a good change, and now even though he has less damage output and money production rate, he's much more fun to play with and compatible in squad modes. I don't like the super low income that comes from level 0 and 2, but that's about it. Next, for the A tier changes, we have Pursuit. I like how they adjusted the top path to be a short range tower that you have to constantly manage to get max DPS, and it's super fun to play with. This change diversifies the top path and bottom path, and overall makes both worth using. Then, finally for the A tier changes, we have Mercenary Base. A lot of people are going to disagree with this one, but I think that this tower is so much more fun to play with now that it's more reliant on unit stacking, with super duper low spawn cooldowns. It essentially feels like Elf Camp, but more structured around late game, and I like that a lot. Okay, one more. I forgot to include this in during writing the script, so my fault, but our last tower in A tier is DJ Booth. I don't have too much to say about this one, but I think it was a good nerf, as it makes it less of a brain-dead support and more of a support that you actually have to manage, even when it's at max level with the Trinity buffs. It didn't need all those super high passive buffs in my opinion, so I enjoy these changes. Now, we're at the changes I absolutely love, being in S tier. Our first S tier is the Mortar. I think that what they did with this guy was absolutely perfect. The problem with Mortar was that it took up placements from towers like Ranger on cliff spots, which made me really not want to bring him over something like Rocketeer. Now that the placement limit has been incredibly reduced, he's more compatible with other cliff towers because he won't completely steal the spots. Taking up less spots for cliff units is absolutely vital, especially in modern day maps that are noticeably starting to give us less and less cliff spots. Overall, really good changes. Our next S is Golden Cowboy with similar reasons to Mortar. Now he's absolutely viable, and in fact super encouraged in every single mode since farm has been nerfed, and they reduced the placement limits for him. This dude is my favorite golden tower, and seeing him receive this kind of glow up is absolutely great, and I'm super excited to be using him more. Finally, our last S tier change is the Golden Pyromancer. What they did with this guy was really good, making him worth using. Permanent burn time was such a good decision, especially when Spotlight Technician is in the game. It essentially allows him to do just as much as Spotlight Technician. However, instead of being forced to set him on random and rely on RNG to do burn damage, Golden Pyromancer can apply burn to absolutely every enemy, the sole exception being burn immune enemies. Golden Pyromancer is absolutely crazy now, and I'm glad to see him back to his former glory. Well, this is the final tier list. I'm so tired of talking and my voice absolutely hurts, so I'm glad this is over with. Overall, I think that this update was a nice shakeup of the meta, however, there were a lot of improvements to be made with some of these changes. I really do think that the people acting like this update needs to be reverted, needs to open their eyes and realize that this patch was absolutely needed to make the game overall less stale, allowing a variety of towers rather than having clearly good towers and then towers that aren't worth using at all. Let me know what you guys think of this update in the comments, and most importantly, let me know how this tier list was in the comments. Make sure to join my Discord server as we host giveaways there, and I'm overall trying to make it a better server, and I'd be glad to see you there. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe. Goodbye.